There is a room at NASA's Johnson Space Center that most people will never hear about. Inside that room, a small team of engineers and mission planners has been working on something for the last 18 months. Not a rocket, not a capsule, not a rover. Something that, if it works, will permanently change what it means to be a human being on this planet. And I mean that literally. What they are building is a way to leave Earth and never have to come back. I am not going to tell you what it is yet. You need to understand what came before it first, because this thing, this secret next step, only makes sense once you understand exactly how close NASA came to losing everything, and how one decision, made quietly, without a press conference, without a headline, set the entire future of the human species on a completely different course. Stay with me until the end, because the reveal is not what you think it is, and once you hear it, you will not be able to unhear it. 2 weeks ago, 4 astronauts climbed inside a capsule the size of a large SUV. They strapped in, pointed themselves at the moon, and flew 252,000 miles from Earth. For 10 days, they ate packaged food, floated in microgravity, and stared out the window at a universe that did not care whether they lived or died. And then they came home. Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, Jeremy Hansen. They splashed down in the Pacific Ocean on April 10th, right on schedule, and recovery divers had them out of the water within the hour. Every parachute opened, every system worked. The crew walked off the helicopter under their own power. Artemis 2 was, by every measurable standard, a success. But here is what the headlines missed. The heat shield came back, damaged, again. The same cracking, the same uneven ablation, the same mysterious divots that showed up after Artemis 1 in 2022. The engineers photographed it inch by inch. They captured thermal data from aircraft during re-entry, and what they found confirmed something they had been quietly afraid of for over a year. The heat shield they designed is not the heat shield they need. The Orion capsule re-enters the atmosphere at Mach 33, 25,000 miles per hour. The plasma that wraps around the capsule during those 6 minutes of communications blackout reaches temperatures of up to 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit, hotter than the surface of the sun in some simulations. The Avcot material on the shield is supposed to ablate, burn away in a controlled, predictable pattern, carrying that heat with it so the crew inside never feels it. But it is not ablating the way the models predicted. It is cracking in places it should not crack, and nobody, not at NASA, not at Lockheed Martin, not anywhere, fully understands why. So they did something remarkable. They flew the mission anyway. They flew 4 human beings on a vehicle with a heat shield that was behaving unpredictably because the math said the underlying structure would hold, and it did. But that decision, that calculated gamble, set off a chain reaction inside NASA that almost nobody outside the agency is talking about.
Here is where things get complicated. Artemis 3 was supposed to be the landing, the big one. 2 astronauts descending to the lunar South Pole aboard SpaceX's Starship, spending a week collecting samples, making history. It was going to be the moment people pointed to for the next 50 years. That mission is gone, pushed, replaced, rewritten entirely. The new Artemis 3 is not going to the moon at all. It is staying in Earth orbit. And it is going to do something that has never been attempted with these vehicles, something that sounds almost absurdly simple on paper, but is, in practice, one of the most technically demanding things NASA has ever tried. The crew will launch on the Space Launch System, fly to low Earth orbit, and rendezvous and dock with the commercial lunar landers. Both of them, SpaceX's Starship Human Landing System and Blue Origin's Blue Moon, which will have been launched separately on their own rockets. They will climb inside both vehicles. They will run the systems. They will test the suits. They will do everything short of actually going to the moon. And then they will come home. This is NASA's Apollo 9 moment. In March 1969, astronauts flew the lunar module in Earth orbit for the first time.
Nobody remembers that mission. Nobody puts it on coasters. But without it, Apollo 11 never happens. Artemis 3 is that mission. Quiet, unglamorous, absolutely essential. Now, here is the part that should keep you up at night. SpaceX's Starship needs to be refueled in orbit before it can go to the moon. Not once, 14 times. 14 separate tanker flights filling a propellant depot that does not fully exist yet. Each tanker flight is another Starship launch. Each launch is another opportunity for something to go wrong. And the orbital fuel transfer technology, moving liquid methane and liquid oxygen between vehicles in the vacuum of space, has never been done at this scale, ever, by anyone. Blue Origin's Blue Moon is a different vehicle, smaller, more conventional in some ways, but it too has never flown with humans aboard. And according to a March report from NASA's own Inspector General, the uncrewed landing demonstrations both companies must complete before crew gets on board will not be fully representative of the final crewed vehicles, meaning the first time a human being rides inside either of these landers in their final configuration might be the actual mission. Artemis 4, early 2028, the first crewed lunar landing in 56 years. 4 astronauts fly to lunar orbit. 2 of them climb into the lander and go down. For the first time since December 14, 1972, human boots press into lunar soil. And they are doing it in one of the most hostile places on the surface of the moon, the South Pole. Permanent shadow, temperatures dropping to minus 390 degrees Fahrenheit in certain craters, terrain rougher and steeper than anything Apollo ever touched. They chose this place on purpose because locked in those frozen shadows, undisturbed for billions of years, is water ice, and water is oxygen, and oxygen is fuel, and fuel is the key to everything that comes next.
Now I need to tell you about the room. After Artemis 2 splashed down, while the recovery teams were still photographing the heat shield and the astronauts were being examined by flight surgeons in Houston, a separate meeting was taking place at Johnson Space Center. A meeting that was not on any public calendar, a meeting that had been scheduled 6 months earlier, contingent on Artemis 2 coming home successfully. The subject of that meeting was not Artemis 3. It was not Artemis 4. It was not even Artemis 5, the second landing mission where NASA plans to begin physically building the first permanent human outpost on the moon. The subject of that meeting was what happens after the base is built. Here is what NASA has not said loudly, but has said in planning documents, in budget justifications, in quiet interviews with senior officials who know the long game. The lunar base is not the destination. It never was. The moon is a test bed. The South Pole base, the nuclear reactor, the water extraction, the 3D printing of structural components from lunar regolith, the rovers, the rotating crew, all of it, every single piece of that infrastructure is being designed with one purpose in mind: Mars. Not metaphorically, not eventually, not in some abstract future generation sense. The systems being tested on the moon between now and 2032 are the exact systems a Mars mission would require. Water extraction from ice, nuclear power generation for environments with no reliable solar input, long-duration surface habitation in a vacuum, closed-loop life support, in situ resource utilization, turning the local environment into food, fuel, and building material. The moon is the rehearsal, and NASA is not alone in running it. China has already landed robots on the far side of the moon. They have returned samples from the surface. Their stated goal is a crewed lunar landing by 2030 and a permanent base to follow. Their timeline for Mars comes after that. If America's lunar base is operational by 2032 and China reaches the moon around the same time, the race that follows is not a race back to the moon. It is a race to Mars. And whoever gets there first controls the most strategically important piece of real estate in the solar system, a planet with enough land area, resources, and distance from Earth to essentially operate as an independent civilization. That is not science fiction.
That is the actual strategic calculation being made right now in rooms in Washington and Beijing. And this is why the heat shield matters so much, not just for Artemis, not just for the lunar base. If the heat shield fails, if one of the landers fails, if a single critical link in this chain breaks at the wrong moment, the entire sequence collapses. And the window, the political window, the budget window, the technological window, does not stay open forever. It never has. The SLS rocket nearly died in May 2025. The administration wanted to cancel it. For months, the entire program beyond 3 flights was uncertain. Then legislation passed and the funding survived. But that episode revealed exactly how thin the ice is. One election, one budget fight, one catastrophic failure caught on camera, and it is over. Not delayed, over. NASA knows this. That is why Administrator Isaacman said what he said at the post-splashdown briefing. 3 words that sounded like management speak, but were actually a mission statement. Keep flying, keep learning, keep iterating. He was not talking to the engineers in that room. He was talking to history. Because here is the truth that the agency will not say in a press release, but that every serious person in the space program understands. There is exactly one scenario in which human civilization becomes a multi-planetary species within the lifetimes of people alive today. And that scenario requires that every single thing currently being built, tested, planned, and funded between now and 2032 actually works. Not mostly works, works. The capsule is home. The crew is safe. The data is being collected. And in a building at Kennedy Space Center, another rocket is already being stacked. The question was never whether we could get back to the moon. The question is whether we are actually ready to leave. And the answer to that question begins not with a launch, not with a landing, but with a room full of engineers working on something most people will never hear about, designing the systems that will carry the first human beings to set foot on another planet. That is what comes after Artemis 2, and the clock is already running.